Are fitness trackers accurate? Do they work? Are they worth it? Can you trust them to measure your heart rate? All good questions. Let's sort it out. I'm Biomedical Engineer Tom Smoot. Over the next few minutes, I'll break down how fitness trackers measure your heart rate, whether they meet medical standards, and when they might not work so great. I just got my hands on a Fitbit Charge 6, so I'll be using that as my example device. I also own a few other devices, so I'll be sure to note differences I see in the overall market. But now, it's time for me to put on my biomedical engineering hat. When people think heart rate monitor or fitness tracker, most people think ECG or EKG, right? But that doesn't necessarily happen on the wrist. Tracker bands like this have contacts on the side to get an ECG signal. Let's quickly review some cardiology to understand what's happening. This bunch of squiggly lines is called an electrocardiogram. This is a real ECG, and it shows the graph of electricity around your heart. The heart is a very complex pump, and we need all of this information to make sure blood is flowing through the pump properly. When you have an ECG done with a medical professional, the 12 leads are a bunch of electrodes wired to your bodies. We don't get that with commercial watches and bands and straps. We get one lead. So while the electrical signal we're collecting through ECG may in fact be medical grade, there's definitely not enough information from a fitness tracker to make a medical decision, especially related to anything cardiology or cardiovascular system. My Fitbit doesn't continuously track ECG. Most heart rate measurements at the wrist don't. If you want ECG feedback, you want a heart rate strap. You can get them from companies like Garmin, Polar, Wahoo. Here's what happens at the wrist. You can measure electrical potential across the fingers, or you can rely on a few well-placed lights. These LEDs don't all shine a light, some of them measure light. Let's call them LED photodetectors. I guess I should tell you what they do. Let's go to Wikipedia. Hit me up in the comments if you want to learn more about ECG. I have a lot more to talk about, but we have to move on. I'm also really curious to know who's using what devices out there. I personally have a Sunto watch that I'm very fond of, but I'm curious how people get along with Garmin, with Polar, with Wahoo, and all of those other things. So let me know. But let's go. Wrist-based heart rate measurement is most commonly done through a process called photoplethysmography. That's a big word, and I probably just butchered it, but let's use PPG for short. I'm going to break it down, and to do that, we've actually come to the Wikipedia page for pulse oximetry, which uses the same technique as our wrist trackers. Basically, we're shining two LEDs, two little lights, into the skin and seeing what reflects back. One light looks at hemoglobin. Well, both lights look at hemoglobin. One light sees the hemoglobin that is full of oxygen, and one light sees the hemoglobin that's empty, has no oxygen. And between the two of them, we can make a measurement. We can take a guess at how much oxygen your blood is carrying, which is super for pulse oximetry. But how does that work for a fitness tracker to pick up your heartbeat? Well, let's go back to some cardiology. So this cardiology research paper is on arterial stiffness, and the first figure gives me a great opportunity to explain, to show you in graphic form, how PPG is able to pick up your heartbeat. What you can see here on one side of this is elastic arteries versus stiff arteries. So normally our blood vessels are very, very elastic. And when the heart squeezes, the blood vessels swell up and you can see the pulse. And because I mentioned PPG measures the volume of hemoglobin with carrying red blood cells or carrying oxygen, you see a change in the light that's reflected back. Likewise, when the artery collapses back in and goes back to its normal form, that change goes back to normal. That back and forth, that up and down, gives us a measurement of when the heartbeat happens. That's how you can pick up one lead equivalent from an EEG. It is not the same measurement. It's not measuring electrical activity. It's measuring the light reflected when the heart pumps. I also use this graphic because you can see here, in the case of the elderly with stiff arteries, that presents a problem. In this case here, in this graphic on the right, with stiff arteries, it becomes increasingly difficult to pick up a heartbeat. And that's going to lead us to the fact that there are actually a bunch of limitations to PPG. It will also lead us to answering some of those questions like, do fitness trackers work? Are they accurate? So let's go back to Wikipedia. Keep in mind, we're using the same little LEDs, whether this is a pulse oximeter or a fitness tracker. All of this applies. We just discussed the issue of arterial stiffness, but here on Wikipedia you can see a long list of issues. For example, if you're very cold, blood vessels in your extremities shrink. Then there's insufficient blood flow and the concerning case of hemoglobin carrying something other than oxygen, like carbon monoxide, where you might be in a state of hypoxemia and not even know it. COPD could be an issue, but let's discuss skin because that's been significantly studied. First, there's like a dozen different types of skin on each person. All of it changes as you age. The little lights need to shine through the skin and reflect back. So if you have skin issues, a fitness tracker might be a little frustrating. Along with skin, you can see movement is an issue. This is why you see apps reporting data collected while you sleep. It's probably dark, and for the most part, you're lying still most of the time anyway. I should say that skin issues also include different races and factors like whether you have more or less melanin. This is a bit controversial, and you can read much lengthier details on the Wikipedia page. Apparently, there was a period where insurance companies were using pulse ox data to pad their profit margins. Go figure. That about covers it, though. In summary, fitness trackers are not medical devices. Do not rely on them for a medical diagnosis. They're helpful for spotting trends and keeping tabs on your overall health. They'll definitely give you things to talk to your doc about. If you found this helpful at all, mashing those buttons to like and follow along are the best way to help me help you. I'm Tom Smoot, Biomedical Engineer with 8 years in a research lab and always curious how our bodies work.